Hey, my name is Mike Arnold. I'm an author, entrepreneur, work from homer. Catch me on this week's episode of the Jesse T Show.
Mike Arnold, welcome to the Jesse T Show, brother.
Happy to be here, Jesse.
Man, I can't wait to have this conversation because we're having a lot of people feeling what it is that you're able to guide them through in terms of working from home and the psychology behind that and how to kind of balance life and business. But tell a little bit before we dive into that about who you are and what brought you to today.
Well, I mean, I'm a guy just like you, just like everybody else out there, human trying to be. And I wrote, obviously the book I wrote for people who work from home and just going through my own mistakes and really getting by the skin of my teeth, you could say, in a lot of ways for many, many years. I have a pretty interesting story that I haven't really told actually necessarily on a podcast so far, which I think I could definitely dig into here. But had a unique beginning and again, just went through a lot of different ups and downs and made it out and was able to find myself always at the top despite anything that stood in my way. And I wrote a book about basically what I did to get it together and be successful. And I use it today. I use exactly what I wrote down as a roadmap for myself in case I get too sidetracked doing something else. So that's ultimately what it is and what I'm here for.
What were some of those challenges you faced in terms of being able to, like you, as you stated, get out? What was it that was kind of pulling you back or pulling you down that you had to overcome?
Honestly, I'll tell you just from the beginning, and obviously I'm going to short story this. I'm not going to obviously go into like massive detail, but I actually left high school really early on in about 10th grade because of multiple reasons. My mom was sick. She couldn't work. I mean, almost a cliche story. Moved to California and decided to get a job, tried to do school while going to work, but it wasn't working out. And so very early on, I took a lot of different jobs, doing a lot of different things just to try to survive and pay bills. And if you know about California, even before all this craziness, you realize it's very expensive to live there, let alone trying to live with, other kids and a family. And so ultimately, a lot of what I went through was the fact that I wasn't as educated as another person because I didn't have necessarily the ability to jump in. I was educated, street smart. I think I was just generally smart and could get around and do a lot of things and was able to really learn from watching. But then just naturally started digging into my own education very early on, reading and trying to dig in. And I realized that, I grew up actually in a special education and all this stuff, and then kind of went out of it and decided to take my own education on my own. And as I started to do that, I realized I was learning way faster than the average person for some reason. And I was like, given the ridiculous, and I say this total bullshit name of ADHD and ADD and all this shit that I truly think is just a way for the system not to adapt to the speed at which most people are able to learn in this environment. And I'm an example of that, where I was always told that I couldn't learn and that it was horrible and I was a slow learner. And then I received information at the speed at which I wanted it, which was 5 times the normal person. And lo and behold, I was able to capture and use more than ever before. And started doing that from, my working in an employee office space into working for myself. And I learned more and more about it by starting in a finance business at the complete bottom and used that skill once I had understood what actually occurred here and realized the switch that had taken place in my mind, if you will, in my spirit. And was able to absorb everything about that business. And in 1 year, I became the general manager and then the president, and then opened my own business after 1 year of never knowing that business existed at all, and became successful at it for many, many years. And that's when I started making, large checks, you could say, 20, 30, 40, 50, $100,000 a month. And so I realized with no education and ability alone and efficiency and understanding of being able to self-educate, self-motivated to educate, it really became just a way of life for me to educate based on what I wanted, not based on what I was told I needed to have. And so long story short, I used that momentum to continue me into the path of working for larger companies, and really just was able to utilize the efficiency skills, knowing when to say no, knowing when to say yes, knowing when to manage myself. However, a lot of the things I write in this book, I didn't do in the beginning, which I failed many times doing. I still had a ton of fun. I mean, I blasted off with fun. I was very shoot from the hip, spontaneous. Some of the best things I've ever done have been spontaneous, which I'm sure you can totally, resonate or have reality on. But I think really these large companies started coming after me and headhunting me because of what I had done for myself. I was one of the first guys ever on the internet to advertise commercial financing. I was one of the first guys to blast off, and I guess you call it spam now, but I was like working with guys that were creating programs that would put ads on Craigslist all over the country at the same time. I was doing these things that obviously today you can't do, but I was doing things that had never been done before. And I remember the first time I walked into one of that finance business, the guy's like, don't reinvent the wheel. And that just drove me fucking crazy.
Wow.
So, and forgive me, you can dub this out if it's, but that was the biggest piece, was that, I listen a lot more than I talk, other than right now, of course. But, and it's funny, I thought about this morning. You ever heard of the Fool card in tarot cards?
I have. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've basically played the Fool card a long time, where I portray the fool because I want to hear what other people have to say so I can make my estimation first. And for a while I was like, when are you going to be the teacher? Why are you going to always be the student? If you asked me what my hobby was, I would tell you it's being a student. I definitely can teach and I know a lot, but I love learning.
Yep.
And so anyway, long story short, I progressed further and further and further and became more and more successful. And I think ins and outs of working from home and balancing your life became really important 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years into working from home. It really wasn't the first few years. It's after that. It's after you have pushed yourself into everything that you have, working yourself to death because you're your own boss now, even though you have a boss or you don't have a boss. And we're our own worst critic, and we're our own slave drivers, right? And that's really what it comes down to, is if you're going to be your own judge, right? And you're gonna obviously be your own worst critic, then you need to obviously just ensure you have some tools, right? Some more tools. Just like obviously, I think we're both investing in ourselves heavily on educating and experiencing life, right?
No question. Yeah. I mean, it's like we talked before jumping on, investing in yourself is the best investment you'll ever make. And that includes having shared experiences and doing things that are spontaneous, like random travel or random events. And it's important because it adds a different quality of life that is, more interesting than if you're just kind of going through the motions. And if you're just kind of running on that hamster wheel of performance or chasing after something, but you're not enjoying the journey while you're doing those things, it's going to take away a lot of your life. Because I've been thinking about this a lot recently, where it's kind of come up for me. They say we sleep for a third of our lives, and that's kind of scary to me because how fast life is moving right now. And as soon as you get into your 30s, I feel like for a lot of people, and for me specifically, I'm 39. I feel like over the last few years, life has started to just fast forward to the nth degree. And I've looked at this kind of in my own framework of when you're a kid, and I have 2 sons, so I kind of look at their lens and I can see how they operate. And when you're a kid, you really don't have a concept of time. You have people pushing you through time and space to go to different things that you have to be to, whether it's school or taekwondo or soccer, whatever it is. But as a kid, you're not wearing a watch. You don't have a cell phone. You don't have it in your mind that you have to be at a certain place at a certain time. And so I remember, and I don't know if you've shared this experience as well, but like growing up, I remember as a kid, I never really had a concept of time. Like I was always in the moment. I was fully present. I was doing what I wanted to do. But as soon as you start getting responsibilities like a job, or you're in college and you have scheduling, or you're going and chasing stuff, time really becomes this construct we've all agreed on, which A, is bullshit. But number 2, it's like time goes by way faster when you pay attention to it. So it's interesting where something just came up for me thinking about this, where I want to get back to being like a kid, where it's like I don't really pay attention to time as much. But I think that's kind of hard to do for some adults. And so the reason why I'm also thinking about this is thinking about structure and thinking about working from home. And so when you work from home, a lot of people you say, that are entrepreneurs or independents, I feel like they can kind of get caught up. Like I've noticed myself doing this back in the day, not so much anymore, but like if like there's laundry that needed to be done, or if dishes are dirty, or if whatever it is, what is a good way to have some structure for people when they start their first endeavor working from home, if they maybe don't have that, discipline? How can they create discipline to make sure that they're working a full 8 hours or more if they need
Yeah,
to? Yeah.
That's a good question. Well, first, let me address something that I've come to understand from a lot of study and a lot of experience. The reason that we don't remember a lot of things as a kid is because we didn't have ownership on things. And for some reason, ownership of things also has a lot to do with our memory in relation to time. So a lot of times the reason that kids don't actually feel like they pay attention to time is because, in my opinion, of course, not necessarily is just a blanket statement for everything, is because they don't actually remember retaining ownership over things that they truly own. You're given shoes as an example. That I, read this somewhere, and you're told that they're yours, but if you don't take care of them, you get in trouble. So they're not really yours. But the things that you started to own, and then obviously fully own yourself, is when you really started noticing time and where you actually had to be somewhere and do something. And it's interesting because a lot of people talk about owning this, owning that, being successful, and doing all these different things, but ultimately, I think, being fluid, flowing, having a bunch of houses all over the country is great, but being and owning those houses and not sharing those with the community is not great. Right. Because then those tie you down and you become a slave to your things. And so I think ultimately time and having are the same. They just essentially are creations that we have decided to enslave ourselves to. Sure. Just like the agreement, they're all agreements technically. So ultimately discipline is a tough word, because when someone disciplines themselves, and using that word specifically has a very negative connotation and nuance under it for a lot of people, because when you think of discipline, you think of punishment, and that's not necessarily what you want. I'm such a fan of being spontaneous. So the reason I created the book and called it Slacking Off was to be a smartass and say, listen, you want more time for yourself. You need to at least structure your day so that you know what days you can just take off and do whatever you want and slack off, or at least get some slack off time for yourself. So the first thing I tell everybody, which is in the book, is do not calendar or appointment your business stuff first. That is a failing factor, because you're always going to hate it, unless of course you love your job, which of course, is to each their own, right? Love it, schedule it, enjoy it. But these are for the people that don't like to schedule things and don't like to be stuck to a calendar and don't want to be predictable, because I was that person. What I love about those people is they're actually artists. They're artists. They may not be painters, they may not be musicians, but they are artists. And I love the artistic, creative mindset. And I created this for the artist inside of everybody who literally wants to have time for themselves, but is like caught up in this unwillingness to be a label here or a label there or this or that. This is get yourself together personally. Then you can be the best you can professionally. And then you can start doing things because you're a master of the only thing that you're given when you have a body, which is time. That's it. I mean, what is time but particles in motion from beginning to end? So ultimately manage that, right? Understand that, master it. Don't avoid it, but master it, confront it, face it to the fullest degree. That's what I suggest anyway. Maybe on a gradient, of course.
It's a great jumping off point into the book and into the ethos and just kind of the idea of this way of being. And so, we're in a place where we've been in this pandemic for the last 18 months or so. And there's a lot of people that are working from home now that they never have before. There's a lot of people that are, for a while, maybe even still to this day, they were kind of wearing multiple hats at once, whether it was business owner or employee. And then, you have your kids at home. So you're playing like daddy or mommy daycare, and like, there's all sorts of stuff happening. So, right. So what would you say in terms of your experience, in terms of maybe some things you've laid out in the book? where people can really like maximize the time that they are doing those specific things, whether it is, you said blocking out personal stuff and then kind of blocking out business stuff, but making sure that like the biggest thing is being present in those moments. And so like whether it's spending time with the kids and you're fully there and you're not thinking about business, or you're working out and you're training and you're fully committed to the workout, or you're fully committed in the relationship or the business, what are some things that you discuss either from your journey or in the book that can kind of help people do those things where they're really getting the most out of whatever it is they've scheduled into their day?
I would say, honestly, the beginning of my book, I tell everybody to slack off their first day reading the book. I say, take a full day and avoid work at all possible parts. Don't actually do the opposite, which is what a lot of people do when they're not present, right? They're not present. And what are they really doing when they're not present? They're avoiding the current moment, not being in present time. So what I do is I tell everybody to start off right off the bat, avoid work for one full day. And actually, all you have to do is just slack off. Do anything and everything you can do, over or under, doesn't matter, to slack off. The only thing, the caveat, the disclaimer is write down what you do. Yep. And the reason I have people do that is to face when they're actually doing certain things, to notice what they do when they slack off, to hold themselves accountable, not for your boss, not for your friend, your lover, whatever. It's for you to hold yourself accountable so that you can give all you got. Because I think you said this when we talked before. You were like, I love giving all I got into every single moment, living to the absolute fullest in the moment. And I love that. I love that fire. That's amazing. And that's what everybody should do, whether they're working out, they're with their friends, they're with their family, they're at work. It really doesn't matter. Now, it's obviously not something everyone does all the time, but to do it and have that and focus and try is huge. So honestly, that's really it. I mean, I think all of us, change constantly. So to recognize the points at which we consider slacking off aren't necessarily me trying to get you to punish yourself. It's me trying to show you what you need to feel fulfilled for yourself, right? Maybe you need to go to the gym. Maybe you need to read. Maybe you need to be on Facebook. Maybe you need to listen to a podcast, the Jesse T Show. Maybe it is something that you feel like you have to do. But instead of scattering that and not actually giving it your full attention, and then giving a bunch of things just a little bit of your attention into a point where you can't actually use it, give everything your full attention, right? Give the things you're doing your present time self, because that's all you really have, right?
So are there action items? Are there things that people are actually doing in the book that you're prescribing them in a sense to say, hey, if this, then that? Like, what are some of the things that you're telling people to do in the book? Yeah,
I mean, honestly, so I'll tell you the structure of the book. It's very simple. Basically, I put different situations in the book. I say here in the beginning of the book, I'm like, hey, you want to work from home, do this, do that. Here are some tips. Think about these things. It's not an end all be all. And then in the beginning, each chapter, which there's very few chapters, you can read it in an hour, is set up for you to do exercises. And it starts at a gradient. First, confront yourself, then confront your job, then confront your purposes. You're motivated today. Oh, okay. Raise your purpose level. You're very motivated today versus how you were this morning, right? You're very motivated today. Amazing. Do more, produce more, so you can raise that barrier level, so things can come up, so you can raise your purposes, right? These are obviously things that I'm necessarily paraphrasing. And then we get into scheduling, and then it's all exercise based. But what I love about the way I wrote this, and I guess I'm patting myself on the back here, which is horrible to do, but I don't care. I actually wrote the exercise, and then after that or before that, depending on what part of the book, I'm showing you how I fucked up, right? Why did I write this? Well, this is because I did this. Don't do this, what I did. Not this is the best way to do it, right? The whole book is structured. Here's an exercise, try it out. This is why I wrote this. And these are all the mistakes I made. Learn from my experience and learn from yours.
Yeah.
Don't do it script for script, piece for piece by rote. Make your own life with this. And then at the end, I switch it and show you how the perfect day goes using all the things together. And that's essentially one thing I never noticed about books was they didn't really put, how things are done wrong. And that's where most of us learn. We learn by watching that guy run into the wall. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. From other people's mistakes, if you're smart, so you don't make them yourselves. And so what were some of those common themes, mistakes, or things that you were running into that you decided to put in the book that you felt would help other people?
Honestly, I think just confronting myself, when I was slacking off, when I wasn't. I mean, I've always been a fan of guys who are like, I'm really lazy, so I work really hard now, so I don't have to work hard later, and blah, 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 blah. And I, shooting from the hip, like I was the guy who literally was like right at the second on a deadline. But for some reason, mine was like almost as good as the top person, even though they spent weeks on something and I just did it in like an hour.
Yeah.
And like, I was really good about those things. So I think really just, honestly slacking off. And then of course, having fun. I like to have fun, but sometimes things got too serious. This is a game, baby. Let's play. Let's play at all levels, and let's not get too solid. That's the one thing I have to learn this lesson myself even now. Sometimes I let myself get too solid. I don't let myself flow.
Yeah.
Flowing is important. If you're flowing, you're moving. So I think ultimately, one thing that I think I just read the 10X rule, and I've avoided for a long time. Grant Cardone, he's actually amazing. I listened and read that book, and I was blown away. I was like, wow, I can't believe I didn't listen to this. And he was just talking about, flowing and different things and not getting too serious and all these other things. And I just feel like ultimately, when I think of the most Buddha-like people that I've ever met and had the presence and ability to meet, I mean, these guys are true Buddhas. They are overproducers times 1,000 compared to the average human being. The one thing they constantly bring up to me is flowing. It's not stopping themselves from the flow. And I think ultimately, when you think about like work-life balance, in order for something to flow, you need a yin and a yang. You need work and you need life, and you need, to be able to raise your purposes and barriers, which I learned from a third party. It's not something I created, but it really, I think, is all about balance. And my mistakes have taught me that and still teach me that to this day. So it's really just more about work-life balance, time management, face yourself and confront. You want to face the things that you're afraid of. Do them, right? Obviously, these are the lessons we learn individually, right? I'm sure you have it.
You talk about purposes and barriers. Can you expand on that a little bit in terms of like the philosophy, like where you learned it and like what kind of plays into those?
I think ultimately, I studied a lot of different things over the years. I've studied a lot of different philosophies. I think I have always been of the mindset of produce. If everything's failing in your life, produce. If you're not happy with what you got, produce. If you're feeling like you're not succeeding, produce, right? Like if you're worried about your bills, produce. Like that has been my modus of operating. That's a way that I do it. And I learned over years from different people, a guy named Lee Burns, who, talks about freedoms, barriers, and purposes. Talks about the way you use a barrier and you use, your purposes to handle barriers. And if you're doing something, you'll get more barriers. And a lot of people feel like when they get resistance, that it's the time to give up, right? You get too much resistance, you back away. But no, baby, that's the time that you push, you raise your purposes. I think Greg Cardone talks about this too. And a lot of people have a lot of different places that they get their information. I think I've learned it from just a lot of sources. Ultimately, I've had to prove this all for myself. You know what I mean? Like I literally have bypassed so many things in life just by doing whatever the fuck I want, because I felt like I should be doing that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I literally remember in the finance business, I walked in there, I had no experience in any way on the phones or sales or any of these things. And I was in this bullpen, which was like the crappiest thing you can be in, right? As a man I had a daughter on the way and a son, and literally I had like bills piling up. I mean, you talk about like craziness. My wife wasn't working. She's pregnant with my daughter. My son was at home. Our bills were late by months. And I walked into a job that I never had any experience on and decided to take a chance on a commission only job that like, and I was like, I just knew it. I knew I had to do it. And these guys in this job were just like constantly talking like, what are you saying over the phone? Like, what does that mean? And da, 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 da. And I remember one time I got into an argument with this guy who was like 50 years older than me. And I was like, you want to take this out? I was getting all like young and stupid. And anyway, long story short, at the end of the day, I became their boss in 12 months. You know what I mean? And their boss's boss's boss. So it really, these are just some of the things, right? That's just kind of the way that you do it, right? You just keep going and you push and you push and you push and you push. And you just raise those purposes. You raise those purposes. Every barrier comes up, you increase the purpose.
So in terms of, you talk about kind of just the overall, the book and how it's been powerful for you and just how you've learned from the process. What was the actual process of writing the book? Like, when did you come to the idea that you were going to put a book together, and how long did it take? And did you self-publish or traditional? Like, what was the whole journey like for you?
I'll tell you, I self-published, and I had never done it before, and I would never consider myself a writer ever. And I honestly didn't even think about like how to write this to make it sound appealing or anything. I just let it flow. And I wrote this after, in 2019, I had experienced many, many spiritual awarenesses that I think I didn't expect, and many life-changing things that I can't necessarily go into too much detail on, just because it's very private, and maybe one day. But let's just say I achieved many levels of spiritual awareness for myself that honestly I just didn't expect, and I realized a lot of things about life and about myself. Like, we are not bodies, we are spiritual beings with bodies, and our body and our mind and our spirit are completely separate things that mingle together. Some believe on purpose and some believe that they were forced that way, whatever you want to believe. But I learned these things, and it was proven to me, not just somebody giving me information. And with that, I experienced the amount of joy that I can't even articulate in words. But it's beyond enthusiasm. It's beyond bliss. It's serenity. And I had everything I could ever want. I don't know if you've ever you've been so happy that you literally could love anyone, how bad they are, good they are. You could just love them. No matter how fucked up they are, you could just love them because you're so fulfilled and happy. That's where I was, where I was like, I don't care if this guy just murdered 1 billion people. I could find somehow to love him and do something to see something and bring him back, so to speak, or do something, or her, or whatever. So long story short, I just wanted to give something back. I was like, how can I prevent people from going through what I went through? And that's essentially what brought me into the development of the book. And I just started to write. I didn't know what I was going to do. And what's really crazy about it is I literally was just flowing, and I was citing like pages in books that I had to go and double check because I wanted to be accurate, right? And realized that I had cited it, or like put it in the book, in my book, like, hey, page 173 of 4-hour work week, and this, and this, and that was exactly correct. And I'd read it like once, and I was like, man, this is just amazing. And I wanted to build it in a way that I knew would be fast, efficient, and anybody could do it. And I could take an artist, somebody who doesn't like to schedule things, and help them to utilize their calendar and prioritize their day, and prioritize the things that come in their way and take their attention, whether it's themselves or it's other things, so that they're 100% a master of their time, like truly mastering their time in a way that it doesn't make them afraid. Because people are constantly afraid of time. Well, if they knew what I know, they would never worry about one lifetime or any of these things. But I'll just say that you can master it. I think at the end of the day, if you 100% take ownership of your time, every second, every single second, every millisecond, you take ownership, not being ridiculous, right? Like, we're not going to like look at the clock every minute, but take ownership of it for a full day or for a while, and just be responsible for yourself and your own time. Just once or twice, you'll get good at it. And you won't have to look at the clock. You'll just know, right? You'll be like, I already know that at 9 o'clock, I do this, and 10 o'clock, like Grant Cardone's a perfect person. He talks about he's the busiest guy in the world, but he takes an hour every morning to spend with his daughter. That's beautiful. His daughter only gets an hour. That sucks for her if you think about it from a general perspective. But that's actually amazing, because if he lives off of your philosophy, which is be present fully 100%, that's the most powerful hour she's going to get over most parents for weeks or months. And that's huge. That's huge. So anyway, that's the longest story of the answer to your question.
And there's a lot in there I want to touch on. But the first part was, who are some of these, as a student, you talk about, obviously learning and just having a thirst for knowledge. Who are some of these spiritual teachers, or some of these insights that you received? Was it books, podcasters? Was it personal mentors? And what were some of the lessons that you learned as you kind of got awakened in the 2019 year or so?
I'll say, the Vedaic hymns, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Christianity, a little bit of psychology, lots of psychology before, some Scientology stuff. Lots of
did you go clear?
Clear, like
there's a Scientology term called going clear, and it's like once you go far enough down into Scientology, you kind of ascend into this position. And so yeah. Well,
I'd say Scientology is it's probably one of the most underrated things I think I've ever experienced. It's definitely I think one of the biggest things that I love about Scientology is the fact that it's like a prove it for yourself kind of religion. It's not a like, hey, listen to what I have to say and follow my rules. It's a, hey, check this out. And if it's true for you, that's awesome. And if you want to be a Buddhist, or you want to be a Catholic, or you want to be a Christian, or you want to be a Mormon, you can be those things, but let me educate you on these things. And so I think, definitely with Scientology, there's a lot of just, it's really self-awareness. But yeah, I think ultimately I've definitely gained a lot from like L. Ron Hubbard stuff. And I used to study things like Tony Robbins and like if you look at Nikola Tesla, like look at Tesla before it was like Tesla from Elon Musk. Like, look at Tesla, man. Like, that guy gave everybody the secrets to the universe.
Yep.
He literally gave us the directions of how it all works. And it's right there in plain English. And I think like Tesla, I actually saw a quote from Tesla this morning about how he was talking to his mother after she had died. And forgive me, because I don't have the quote in front of me, but it was something like, I dedicated my entire life to mankind, and look at what they've done, and look at how they've treated me. And I think L. Ron Hubbard didn't say that, but I think it's very similar. I think he meant his purpose, in my opinion, totally is basically, help everybody be better versions of themselves and be independent thinkers, critical thinkers, to be who they are and nobody else. And I think it's very similar. You find, I think Jesus probably was the same, where he was like, gave everything. That's the idea anyway. He gave everything to the people. And then what happened? He got crucified. And then you talk about, I don't know where this actually comes from, but no good deed goes unpunished is a term I've heard in like rap music and all kinds of different things. And it really is, it's true, it seems like we're taught in the beginning of our lives to like serve others. And then we get to this point, like when we're in our late 30s, to serve ourselves, to serve others. And then at the end, we realize that even though we've served many others, that it's not actually what we did for them that counts so much as us doing something with full intention and 100% all in for what we believe is the right thing to do. Yep. Like our own personal integrity is more important than our our present life. Like that's a big deal.
Yeah,
That's a big deal.
Being in alignment with your higher self, and just
Yeah.
being, being of service to yourself and other people, and whatever it is that you believe in, just being in accord with all that. So talk about present day now. So what is it that the business looks like? What does life look like? What's kind of changed for you in those avenues versus kind of when you first started this journey? Where are you at now?
I would say to you, I'm obviously, I'm working with a company right now called ROM Tech, Range of Motion Technology. They're a medical technology company, and I'm working a lot with them to help them, expand and do good for people that need to rehabilitate their knees and their feet and their hips, because there's a huge narcotic problem for people who get these surgeries. Like they become massively addicted. And I'll tell you another personal story. Like my mother, when I was 14 years old, got a back surgery, spine surgery. She became very hard addicted to pain medication because of her surgery. She couldn't move. She was an experimental patient and it didn't go perfectly. So for the rest of her life, she was addicted to pain medication. So at 14, I had to grow up. I remember one time my mom had almost overdosed on medication and we had to call the police, me and my two older sisters. And my mom was angry and having relapses about her not getting her pills because we were trying to hide them from her. And she was screaming at us and everything else. And I remember the cops came to the house and one cop said to me, you're not going to go do this, this, and that. And the other, it's total cliche, right? Good cop, bad cop. And this older cop comes to me like the old man in every proverbial story and was like, listen, son, you can either grow up right now or we can send you to foster care. What would you like to do? And I said, I'm going to grow up. Like, that's an easy decision. I don't want to be controlled by you know what I mean? Like I heard all the stories and all this stuff. And so from that point on, I started to basically try to provide for myself as much as I could. My mom definitely still did, right? She was still there and stuff, but it really became on your own kind of thing. You know what I mean? And I think ultimately we kind of learned where to go with that. I kind of, for a moment, I kind of started getting sidetracked here and wasn't being present. So does that answer your question, or did I leave a part out?
Well, you did good, man. It just goes to show you that we're all human, man. And as much as we like to do things and be present and show up, sometimes we just, life calls and nature calls, and
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think back to just, I guess to circle it onto that. And I appreciate that add in there. I started to work with medical technology and found it to be very helpful for people because it lowers the amount of narcotics they take by about 29% generally.
Wow.
So, which is not really a big deal to a lot, but when you really consider the fact that may be like 30 less pain pills taken per person, that maybe, it gets them better quicker. It's a real simple technology, but also really advanced. Plus it gives people the ability to not leave their house. They get to rehab at their house.
Yep.
And it's the first thing to ever do that. So it's amazing technology. And I'm basically helping them. I told you I'm writing the script for a movie. I'm trying to see if I can even play in that space right now. So we'll see if that actually comes to full fruition. It's definitely going to be done. It's just whether or not I put it together, in an enticing way. And then, like I said, I'm working on another version of this to advance. Maybe I'm going to bring in some collaborators and put together something really extraordinary for people, like a very big tool set for working from home that would incorporate many people, like potentially, like I'm thinking the side hustle guy, Chris, I think it's Galoo, don't quote me on the last name. And then of course, Tim Ferriss, who's obviously probably like we talked about, just massively filled with projects, but I'd love to just work and collaborate because, I've read these books before I wrote my book. When I read Side Hustle, I was like, well, what am I really good at? Well, I'm good at working from home, and I'm good at helping people and I'm good at managing. And if I really, I literally, $100 billion company, Cox Enterprises, was able to be the best of the best of the best as I could be, maybe not the greatest, but definitely one of the best, doing it in half the time, a quarter of the time as everybody else. So that means something, right?
Yep.
And so that's essentially, I think, ultimately what I have going on, and a little bit on your last question, I guess.
I love it, brother.
Beginning story.
I love the idea of where we're at right now in terms of just current society and having to work from home. So I think that people, if they want to learn how to do it, you know, to a degree where they're fulfilled both for their business and personal lives, and they're putting themselves first, it sounds like a great way to do it, man. So I appreciate the work that you've put out there, and I'm looking forward to seeing your future works come to fruition, brother. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thanks, my friend. Yeah, likewise. Good to be here. Definitely. Good to talk.
You got it. Take care.